I am still reeling from the most recent Heritage Video Games auction that happened. So many weird things that I didn't understand, didn't expect, lots of surprises. So let's get right on into it. I want to talk first about Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Now, I've got a few things that I want to muse here. It's a 9.6 A++ WADA-graded sealed copy, so the only grade better would be a 9.8 A++. So this is definitely one of the finest examples you'll see. It sold for $900, including the buyer's premium. So that's interesting to me for two reasons. One, what I can tell you is they printed a lot of this game. This had a very large print run. Ms. Pac-Man was one of the most iconic games of the 80s. Obviously, the follow-up to perhaps one of the most iconic games of all time, Pac-Man. And I will tell you that the Ms. Pac-Man port for the Atari 2600 was actually phenomenal. It was light years better than, of course, the ill-reputed Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. So not a difficult game to find, but beloved. $900 though. So what strikes me here is when we look at the history of sales over the last set of months, you'll see that this is almost twice the sale price of the most expensive copy previously, which I believe was approximately $492 back in February of this year. Now, granted, that was a 9.8 A++ sealed, where this is a 9.6. But boy, double the price for that one additional grade point? Maybe, maybe not. Nonetheless, this is telling me that Atari is really getting hot. And so this may be an opportunity. If you're hanging on to some of this stuff and you were looking to sell, it could be the correct time to do so. Let's move on here to the next item. This one was really interesting to me. Here we have a Magnavox Odyssey 2, a complete-in-box console with a smattering of games. It sold for $192, including the buyer's premium. It is not graded. There are companies like VGA that will grade the entire Magnavox Odyssey box, but this is an ungraded console with a smattering of games, a couple of hard-to-find ones. But again, I found this interesting. In my humble opinion, second only to the Intellivision for the least beloved and the least in-demand console out there in the retro gaming space. And, I don't think it was that bad. I think it's unfortunate that it gets the lack of love it does, but nonetheless, it does. I don't think I can go to a community yard sale on any given weekend and not find one for $5 or $10 with the box and a smattering of games. So someone out there really loves the Magnavox Odyssey, and I think that whoever sold this did quite well, so congrats to them on that. Up next, I want to take a look at GunNac for the Nintendo Entertainment System from the developer ASCII. GunNac is one of the most beloved shooters in the NES lineup. It is a truly phenomenal game. It has always carried a certain amount of value, but it was really interesting to see that this was an ungraded copy, complete in box, and it sold for $900 with the buyer's premium. We looked at some comps, and an 8.0 sealed copy a couple years back sold for $780. Now, granted, that was 3 years ago, and 3 years in the graded video game market might as well be 100. But nonetheless, clearly this is a game that is on the rise, and I'm not sure if the buyer really overpaid on this or if I'm underestimating how popular this game has become. Nonetheless, there you go. GunNac, $900 for an ungraded copy. Up next, I want to talk a little bit about one of the all-time favorites in the NES library, Metroid. If you put together, a top 10 list of games, obviously you're going to have all the Marios. You'll probably have the Zeldas in there, but you're also most likely going to have Metroid in there as well. It is truly a universally beloved game. They did make two box designs for this game. The first one is what you're looking at here. Call it the silver box, more in line with some of the classic Nintendo titles, and also like Kid Icarus, which was also a silver game. And then they re-released the game with a yellow box. This is the more desirable, in my opinion, the silver box Metroid, and it sold for $2,160 with buyer's premium. Hard to really tell if that's over or underpriced because, as you can see here, looking at the price history for Metroid, it's kind of all over the map. Granted, there's a lot of different condition levels, but this one is consistently, I think you could say, an in-demand game that it goes into the thousands. Now, obviously, a huge anomaly happened here when you look at the 8.5 A+ sealed Metroid, which was clearly a first production back in October 2021 that sold for $132,000. And that one is clearly an outlier in my mind because there were some crazy things happening in sealed video games in 2021. But nonetheless, interesting to see Metroid holds its value, and it's probably sure to be in demand in the years to come. Up next, this one is absolutely the most baffling to me result from the entire Heritage Auction. Here we have a lot of 2 Mario games for the NES, Mario 1 and Super Mario Bros. 3. These are ungraded, and these are not sealed, and Super Mario Bros. 1 is not even complete. According to the details, it is missing the manual, so you are just buying the box and the cartridge, whereas with the Super Mario Bros. 3, you're getting a true complete in-box copy. Now, this sold the 2 games together for $2,280 with the buyer's premium. A quick look at eBay past Heritage results would show me that I just cannot come up with any sold comps of a Mario 1 and a Mario 3 in similar condition that come anywhere near this price. So I'm certainly left scratching my head. The only theory that I have is that I have seen that the demand for the very early prints of Super Mario Bros. 1 for the NES have absolutely been skyrocketing in the recent past. Just eyeballing the photos of this particular box, it looks to me to probably be a second or third print. There were many print runs of Super Mario Bros. 1 for the NES, many. So obviously the earlier print run you find, the more valuable it is. A true first print Super Mario Bros. Is just astronomical in value. So my theory is that someone really, really wanted a Super Mario Brothers box, and as you can see, paying $2,200 for the lot. That Super Mario 3, even though it's complete and it's the quote-unquote left bros, which means the bros in Super Mario Brothers 3 are aligned to the left of the box versus the right, still, in theory, should not command more than a few $100s. So someone was paying largely for that box, and it's interesting. I mean, it makes me wonder. Maybe the advice here is everyone's got to go into their attics, go to your parents' house, go to your grandparents' house, go in their attics, and hunt for Super Mario Brothers boxes. Doesn't even matter if they don't have the game, just find those cardboard. Next up, here's an interesting story, and it's one of those cautionary tales that lest you think you just start buying and collecting these games thinking they're going to go up in value forever. That's not always the case. This is Super Double Dragon for the Super Nintendo. It's a 9.0 sealed copy. It sold for $1,140 with the buyer's premium. I thought that was interesting because a quick look at history shows that there was a 9.0 sealed Double Dragon that sold last April in 2022 for almost double that, $2,160. So not all sealed games, even if the title or subject matter is popular, and Double Dragon is as popular as they get, go up in value in perpetuity. Some drop down. So a word of caution, you do need to understand the market if you're going to play in this space. Up next, this is a really interesting item to me. This is a Joe Spencer. I believe that would be the artist, Joe Spencer, who drew this. This is from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Crossroads of Time for the Super Nintendo, Super Nintendo game, and this was clearly artwork for an advertisement for that game. Interesting for a couple reasons. You don't typically see stuff like this in the standard weekly Heritage auctions, so it kind of stood out a little bit. And I thought the price was interesting, $216 with the buyer's premium. Now, I'm not an expert on Star Trek collectibles and memorabilia, but I have a funny feeling that the seller probably would have done a lot better if they consigned this particular piece at a Star Trek exclusive auction rather than a video game auction that just happens to have a Star Trek game. Just a hunch. I have a feeling that there might be some regrets on the seller's side on this one, but if you were the Star Trek fan that snagged this, my hat's off to you, and there you go. Pet a tribble or something. I don't know. Enjoy your bounty. That's how much Star Trek knowledge I have. That's the only joke I could think of. Here's an interesting case study, if you will. Yep, there's a joke in there somewhere. A factory case of 6 copies of Dungeons & Dragons Eye of the Beholder for the Game Boy Advance. It sold for $139, which itself feels about right for what I'm seeing these factory cases of otherwise not noteworthy games that you wouldn't really expect to fetch a lot if you cracked the case, sent them all off to be graded, and attempted to sell them. So that price isn't surprising. What was interesting to me when I was going through these auctions and the results and the comparables is I noticed this little interesting gem. Just a few months prior, what appears to me to be the very same case sold for $613. That's right, over, by my math, over 4 times the amount that it sold for this past week. And I wondered to myself, well, why did it take a drop of 80% in such a short amount of time? And then I realized, looking at the details of the auction, this is a PAL version of the game. So the PAL version of the game refers to the market in which the game was sold. So in North America, we have a TV standard called NTSC. So for video games, a North American game would be called an NTSC release. In Europe, the TVs use what's called PAL in terms of the display type, and so a European release of a game would be called the PAL release. Now, again, not advocating or taking sides, but just the reality on the ground is that the market value for PAL games across the board, regardless of whether they're complete in box or sealed, what have you, are notoriously much, much lower than their NTSC North American counterparts, and you can certainly guess all day long and speculate as to why that may be. My theory here is that the buyer for this case didn't read the fine print and bid it up thinking that it was an NTSC version of the game, had cold feet, and either didn't pay or took the loss, bought it, and immediately turned around to resell it at the next auction, at which point it got a price that's more in line with what you'd expect. Unfortunate for whomever was caught up in that, but again, yet another lesson. You need to read the fine print and don't get caught up in the hysteria and the euphoria of participating in an auction, whether it's video games or anything for that matter. Up next, here's an interesting title and an interesting thing to me. I'm a big fan of the Sega Master System. I think it's underappreciated. Of course, this was the console generation one prior to the iconic Sega Genesis console. A lot of people don't even know that there was a Sega console that predated the Sega Genesis. And the Sega Master System had some really cool titles and some gems in there. Where in the World is Carmen, Sandiego is a fun little kind of educational game. It didn't have a huge print run, and this copy was a 9.6 sealed copy for $192. Relative bargain compared to some of the previous comps we saw on this, and I just thought it was noteworthy because, again, it's not the easiest game in the world to find. and someone got a very good deal on it, I strongly suspect that at some point in the future, the people that have been sleeping on the Sega Master System will be filled with regret, because I do think that that's going to find its place at some point, and you're going to see some increased demand for across the board for the Sega Master System stuff. So hats off to whoever got a deal here. And that pretty much wraps it up for some highlights from this past Heritage video game auction. I hope you enjoyed watching my musings on this. If you do enjoy, you know the drill. Please consider liking and subscribing. And I hope that you'll let me know in the comments what you thought about this auction, your opinions on the various topics we discussed. Let's have a chat, and I will see you next time right here on It's All Duggan Games.